Hi, this is Ari Kopel with Shattering the Matrix. We have our wonderful guest today, Eve Lorgen, who's back with us today for part 3 of Milabs and Super Soldiers. And for all of those that, of course, know Eve, there's no introduction, of course, but for those that are brand new to our show and have not heard of Eve Lorgen yet, you'll be in for a wonderful surprise. But Eve Lorgen is a dedicated counseling professional. She's also a UFO alien abduction researcher. She's a yogi and a writer. She began her pioneering work with alien abductees while earning her master's degree in counseling psychology in 1992. She also holds a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry and worked in the biotechnology industry for 7 years. Eve started a support group in 1994 in San Diego, California, or San Diego County, California, for experiencers of anomalous trauma and continues to consult with anomalous trauma clients worldwide today. She was a close associate of the late Barbara Bartholic and is dedicated in continuing and expanding the work of the late Dr. Carla Turner. Eve also is the author of The Love Bite and The Dark Side of Cupid. So you can catch those two books, which are really wonderful books to have and to understand this phenomenon that she's going to be discussing today. But you can pick those up in Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Anyway, Eve, thank you very much for being with us today and for joining us today for part 3.
Thank you. Yes, we have a lot to share, and I thought I would talk not only about maybe some of the Milab things, but also alien abductions and a little bit about alien implants, the fluorescence markings, and some of the work of Dr. Corrado Malanga and how it correlates with what I've found in my own, practice. So I think we'll have a lot to talk about, and
that's fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to it. Yeah, absolutely. So where would you like to start? I mean, what would you like to,
Well, I'll just start with current events and the time that we're in right now. And I know that this show will be recorded after this pre-record a few days, but in September this month, it seems to be a very energetically powerful month.
Yep.
I've been having actually a lot of challenges in my personal life with family member deaths and illnesses, and just I guess my sensitivity has been amplified by, I believe, I'm just trying to get more in tune with what I call the planetary animal mother, the Gaia Sophia, divine wisdom, and taking the planetary Tantra vow, understanding like the Dakini shifts, as we call it, when we have each new moon or day after that, you go into a new shift of energy, and I guess it would be like an aspect of Sophia, or the planetary animal and mother. They'll have different Dakini intelligence aspects, which they give their instruction and have their essence of being overshadowing that period of time. So I've been tuning in with my sensitivity more amplified, so it makes life a little bit more, let's just say, there's been a lot of ups and downs, and the upping of sensitivity of energy. I think that's been happening with a lot of people in general that I've talked to, not just people who are involved in, let's say, the planetary Tantra.
Right.
So, but really, so I was just going to say, have a little compassion for not only everybody around us, but me. And I usually don't ask for that, but it's been very challenging for me lately to even maintain my calm amidst all the things that are happening in the world, which, of course, the Syrian situation, and people not wondering from one day to the next whether or not we're going to have World War III, and how this even connects with what we call the third force. I've heard someone talk about recently in an article where the third force is really an aspect of what they call the satanic, demonic / archontic, or the dark, malevolent alien agenda, and how that has infiltrated our world and is playing itself out in a really big way right now.
Yep.
So, and not only understanding how that's working, but what we can do about that, and understanding, the alien presence with respect to the malevolent parasitic ones. And so those are the kinds of things that I deal with, is a lot of the dark side, and then learning how to balance the light side with that within myself, and also maintaining my own sensitivity, which is a real balancing act. I mean, in order to maintain one's sensitivity, you feel not only the good, but you also feel the bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it's very challenging to do this. So
I agree.
I just wanted to point that out, and I'm sure that you've had reports of your own.
Oh yeah, I was just going to tell you that don't think you're alone out there, because you're not. And not only from my own personal experience, experiencing very a lot of challenges right now, feeling a lot of these energies happening as well. But I speak with a lot of people who are also experiencing the same thing, and everybody's going through their own challenges. So so I just wanted to maybe we'll just start a glee club or something.
I think so, or the glee club that's aware that there's an unusual war going on,
exactly.
And we are the pawns, and when we have our awareness amplified, and a lot of people are waking up right now. I mean, how can we not wake up with all these things happening?
Yep.
And even the events that are happening worldwide, it's as if it's forcing many people to wake up, whether or not they want to or not.
Exactly.
And that can be a painful process.
Yep.
So
totally agree with you. Totally agree.
Wow. So I guess I could start off with saying a little bit about alien implants.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Some of the more scientific things that have been reported within the alien abduction research community, and things actually have been going on since the mid to late 1990s, when I got involved with collaborating with Dr. Roger Lear and Daryl Sims, and I had attended one of their alien implant surgeries, actually a couple of them, where there was at least 5 individuals who were going to have surgery to have different alien implants surgically removed in different parts of their bodies. Mm-hmm. And so this happened in Ventura County, Southern California. I think it was in 1996. And I actually wrote an article about it, because what I decided to do way back then was interview the people who had those implants removed, and to ask them questions about, before and after their implant surgeries, and when they might have remembered those implants being put in them, if they remembered the experiences, and different levels of awareness about, the before and after of when their implants were taken out.
Okay.
So I felt that was very important at the time, although I think at the time it wasn't considered scientific enough for me to even do this. So actually I did that without the permission of both individuals who were involved. They got mad at me for jumping the gun on it, but I thought, no, this is too important, because there's so much just what I call the disruption and distraction and the warfare element to prevent people from coming to an awareness of what's happening, how it's happening, and what it's really doing to them. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And of course, I still believe that's true today in terms of the larger popular opinion, or what I call the popular flavor of the week in the UFO circus community, is really to idolatrize the aliens as being some advanced intelligence who are so much better and smarter than we are, and and kind of ogling over them. And it's like this popularity thing where, in order to be accepted, you have to kind of look at it from a neutral perspective, or at least think there's a bunch of positive ones out there that you're in contact with, and that makes you special. And really, that makes me puke, to be honest with you. I get so upset sometimes that I don't even want to talk about alien abductions sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So, because of some of the things that I see, and it just makes me sick inside when I see how some people are being, I believe that they're being manipulated and deceived and seduced into thinking that the aliens are something that they're not. And I guess it's because I see so much of the pain and suffering of what people report to me that I just can no longer take that stance, that I see a lot of the popular new agey kind of ways of viewing it. So,
well, there's a lot of people with that alien worship that you're talking about, and many websites out there that are pretty much shunning anybody from coming across as being negative towards aliens. In other words, you cannot even talk about this alien abduction thing, because they'll just basically kick you out of a website. So
yes, or a forum. And I mean, that happened
exactly
years ago when I actually had one of my own forums, and where they actually kicked me off my own list because I was really just letting loose on some of the reports that I had from super soldiers who were having actually conflicts with aliens and actually killed a few aliens in those experiences.
Oh, wow.
And I made a joke out of it, and they got pissed at me, and we're like all feeling sorry for the aliens. I said, "Are you kidding?" But anyway, so
wow.
Yeah, that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But the implants, even years ago, what I thought was interesting is there's some that can show up as metallic or what they thought was meteoric in origin in terms of its content or its physical components that show up on an x-ray. And most of the ones that they did remove were either in the feet or the lower legs, and one of them was in the jaw of an individual. But there were some that were considered non-metallic, which I thought were interesting because in those two cases, it was two females who had implants in the lower leg or the lower calf area. And after it was removed, about a month after the implant was removed, they had dramatic effects such as the reddening of the implant scar and burning, and then shooting pains down the leg. And then one of the women had almost like a diuretic type of effect after the surgery, and like a whole month period of time had, felt ill, like she was kind of going through a detoxification process.
Wow.
But then what happened in that one woman's case is that she actually had memories come back that were previously screen memories, and she was able to get through like a screen memory to the real memory after the implant was removed. And of course, it suggested to me that the implant acts in ways to block certain pathways, certain energetic pathways of consciousness, as well as other things.
Amazing.
But and then after she went through this kind of like a detoxification process, I could even read a few quotes from
if you could,
the article if I can find it.
Okay.
And this was from, let's say, 1997, I believe, and it was in a magazine called Alien Encounters, which was actually a British magazine that published this. And I also have this probably on my website, but you'd have to go through a search and
dig in there, huh?
yeah, and it's so hard because I have a blog, so you can only see the recent ones.
Right.
So I'm just going to quote the lady. I'm going to call her Dorothy O'Hara.
Okay.
She felt a sense of relief, definitely a sense of relief after her alien implant surgery. It was one in the leg. And she said, the most striking changes, she said, I had a severe diuretic effect and lost much water weight during the week following the surgery. Then I developed angina and edema as my health problems worsened. This heart problem was actually a recurring complication from a previous illness that she had when she was in her 20s. And at the time of her surgery, she was 60 years old.
Wow.
And she said, I also experienced extreme fatigue and could not concentrate. The illness lasted about a month, after which my energy and health returned with a renewed vigor. My creativity and mental clarity improved remarkably. I had a startling improvement in me 3 days. I'm reading this here. She said she had a startling improvement in her memory, where I was able to recall a previous alien abduction experience from 1991. In other words, it was the first time I was able to pierce through a screen memory from an abduction, although it took me 3 days to process the memory. It was difficult mentally and emotionally, but in hindsight, after the implant surgery and recovery from the illness, I felt detoxified. And so she did feel better afterwards. But one of the interesting things that she and another woman, they both had something like shooting pains in their leg where the implant was removed, but not necessarily from the surgery itself. It was a different effect, like a month later, where the scar just turns bright red and then getting weird shooting pains down the leg.
Wow.
But it wasn't due to infection or anything like that. Strange reaction 6 months later. So anyway,
that
a couple of people felt like their psychic abilities improved, and then one person felt like their psychic abilities did not improve. So I really think that the implants definitely do something to, for the nervous system. They definitely affect with the nervous system. In fact, Dr. Lear found out that there was neural tissue surrounding the implant that connects with the nervous system. And you can get extreme pain, actually, after these things are removed because they're connected with the nervous system in a strange way.
Wow.
So, we know that they connect with the nervous system. We also know that they connect with the bioenergetic pathways. And I remember having spoken to a woman years ago who's also involved with reverse speech, by the way, and I could mention that a little bit. I guess she had an implant, or she knew someone who had an implant that was put in. And at first, she remembered her dreams pretty well. And then after the implant was put in, she stopped having dream recall. So you see things like the lack of consciousness and the conscious awareness is dulled by some of these implants, I believe, depending on, what kind they are. And there's different kinds that are in different places of the body, and that's something also that Dr. Malanga has found. And also another researcher that I want to mention is Steve Colburn.
Oh, yeah, sure.
He works with Dr. Roger Lear, and he's also in Southern California. And he's got a website that has published a more recent implant analysis in terms of its material and some photographs. And he found that there was, I guess after the implant was removed, or during the implant removal, and it was in the foot of a person, it had broken up into like 12 parts. And it was, I suppose it's difficult, when that happens, but they took all the parts of the implant out and then put it into a tube of serum and blood to keep it in there. And then what it did afterwards is those 12 pieces like reassembled themselves as if by intelligent design back together again. And so that was kind of weird. And one of the things that he said, and I thought was interesting, is that he thinks that there was things inside those implants in that particular case that resembled carbon nanotubules, and that implants will emit a radio frequency. And that's one of the things that he does when he goes to some of these conferences, is that he'll use a device that could detect, I guess, RF radio wave frequencies, and that some implants actually can emit a frequency, and that's how he can tell that they're present in some of those kinds of implants. So we know that does exist, and they are there. Yeah. And I think that people remember aliens putting them in or taking them out, and sometimes people think that it's the government. So it's both going on. In fact, one of the super soldiers that I had interviewed had an implant behind his ear, and one of the ones, I guess, behind his ear, he said that was the communication implant. That particular implant actually allowed telepathic communication between him and his handler.
Interesting.
So different kinds.
Quick question now in reference to these implants. Once they're removed, as far as you're aware, does that prevent the person to get abducted again? Does that reduce the abductions? Does it stop it altogether, or not?
I would say no. It does not, and they usually come back at some point. And one of the questions in my interview from 1998, it was did I think that the aliens were cognizant of the fact that the implants were removed? Was there anything unusual that happened before or after the surgery? And indeed there was. In some cases, it was as if they were trying to stop them from getting the surgery by disrupting them from getting into the meeting, or having an abduction like a week before the surgery to, check in on them, or a week after to do their medical checkup, so that they know. They have a way of knowing. They usually come back.
What's the purpose of the implants? Is it to track the person, or to mess with them, or?
Well, now I think after studying Dr. Malanga's work in conjunction with Dr. Roger Lear's and Steve Colburn's work, is that not only could they be used for tracking, and it could act also as a kind of what I call an object link in magic practices, where people who are magicians can use something as an object link, which would create a portal or a location. It's able to locate people from one dimension to the next. Okay. So that people, let's say if you have an object link put in by a magician in your home or on your body, then that allows that person to be accessed by a demon or by the magician, or even a telepathic object link kind of situation. Wow. So I think that kind of thing is happening on a more subtle interdimensional level, that there's technologies that do things on a more subtle level. It's not as simple as like radio waves or EM waves, So not only that, but one of the things that was reported by me privately to someone who was in the field, there's nasal implants, obviously. Those are very common, and sometimes people remember those things being inserted far up into their nasal cavity, up into the brain. And sometimes, these things will come out naturally, like if you sneeze them out. I even actually know somebody who recently had one taken out and a new one put in. And her abductors
new and improved.
Yeah, they were. It was a new improved model. And these were the military, and they said, we're removing the old one. There's a new one, and it's much smaller, and it's much more advanced. And basically, so they update their technology, and they'll take out the old one, put in a new one,
Oh, my goodness.
So So, but anyway, with this other report where there was a nasal implant being sneezed out, they managed to capture it and then analyze it, look at it under a microscope, and maybe analyze it because this particular person said it was something that had like a lot of tendrils on it, like let's say a main mass, but then with a lot of like tendrils on it, and that these tendrils were made of like a biopolymer kind of substance, and that this particular person believed that the biopolymers act as, I guess, almost like artificial dendrites, where it reaches into and connects with the neural system in your brain to connect with neurons so that they can create these networks in the brain to enable alien hive mind telepathic connections and consciousness.
And was that one in particular from the military, or was that an alien thing?
That was alien. That was alien. That was believed to be alien. Let's put it that way, based on the person's memory. And I know that there's both going on. I'm not going to say it's either or. There really is both going on. But that kind of concerned me, because one of the things that we've noticed over the years is that, you know, many people who've had alien abductions and regular visitations, and Milabs, by the way, or super soldiers, they have higher degree of psychic ability. It just seems to be part and parcel of who they are. Yeah. Sometimes we think it may be due to their bloodline, or something like a psychic gifts runs in the family, and that has been reported. And it's also known, let's say with people who work with trauma, that people who have, let's say, near-death experiences or trauma or repeated trauma can have a higher degree of psychic sensitivity and psychic awareness due to maybe the dissociation. Right. So we know that that's also true. But I think there's something else that enhances, let's say, telepathic ability with alien abductees, with their aliens who get them. And then, you know, there's a lot of telepathic communication that can go on between, you know, the person and their alien handler, but also not only that abductee, but to other abductees, so that there's a, let's just say there's a high level of psychic connectivity and sensitivity with each other. Let's say with each other abductees, there's a higher rate of the ability to psychically connect with one another. So the question in my mind was that, could this be, you know, it's just a natural process, because they're all naturally more psychic and there's something common linking them in terms of experience? Or is there something scientific to this in terms of, you know, are the alien implants or the, what I call the incorporeal alien parasites or the alien hive mind within them, does that cause them to become more interconnected psychically with one another? And I do believe that may be true, that there may be implants that actually help them become psychic with one another, and that's why they are so interlinked with one another. And that kind of concerns me, I guess, because for me it's important to be able to distinguish, you know, what is the difference between artificial telepathy and the experience of artificial and archontic or alien telepathy versus, let's say, a much more organic process of human-to-human telepathy or human-to-spirit telepathy based on a natural organic process.
Correct, and it's becoming harder to discern, isn't it?
Yes, and that's a problem because, I mean, I just had clients, I can't say who or what because it's confidential, but a big problem is, let's say there's really good psychics out there who they may get trained by these very well-known institutes, and then I get a report years later that this particular really good psychic, who may even be famous, is a hosted psychic vampire. Wow. And it's like one of these archontified, you know, reptilian whatever hosts whose function seems to be to psychically vampirize others. And then they put on the show, and they may be really good psychics at the same time, and a lot of people can't tell the difference. Yep. That's a problem. That is a problem. So that concerns me. I mean, that kind of weighs heavily on me in terms of, you know, how can we reevaluate a lot of these experiences that we've had in our lifetimes, even people who've had alien abductions and or spiritual experiences, and then to have to reevaluate, wait a minute, you know, was this a true organic process of a true spiritual experience that's genuine, or is this something that's alien manipulated? Yeah. And that's a very difficult and a very, very uncomfortable subject to broach. Most people don't even want to think about that. They don't even want to think it's possible. And so they basically avoid the subject and think that's just too way out there on the fringe to even consider. But I know for a fact that these things happen. Yeah. Because I get reports all the time. All the time. So. Yep. Absolutely true. Yeah. So which leads to, you know, also possibilities of
potential people who are out there. Well, people who are out there who are spiritual leaders, perhaps,
yes.
but possibly getting information from the ethers. Who knows where they're getting their inspiration from? And do you feel that is also a possibility, that they may be getting information that is really, infiltrated the same way that you're speaking?
Yes, and that's really, the true shaman healer's job is really to detect and discern energies and spiritual presences and whatever's working through people, and to discern, what one gets telepathically. Like the artificial telepathy, especially, let's say, with people who are the targeted individuals, that's pretty blatant. Like, you'll definitely hear a booming voice in your head tell you things, and they will be like taunting criticisms to basically drive the person crazy.
Right.
And so it's similar to some forms of demonic possession or partial possession. But in the targeting, it's much more blatant in terms of, you hear an audible voice in your head kind of thing. Whereas I would think in the more organic, let's say, telepathy, it's more subtle.
Yeah.
And it might be more like you get an immediate understanding of what's said, and your brain is translating it through language, but really on a higher level, it's like this pure understanding of something that comes at a higher level, where it's more in your heart. And that's something that actually George Kavasilis has talked about on some of his shows, because he's run the gamut of having many alien encounters, and then thinking that the ones that he was associated with the Galactic Federation, for example, and getting telepathic messages and being shown things all over the ship and all over the universe, and then having to reassess, what is this now? Is telepathy through the mind an accurate form of communication, or should we even go deeper in order to trust what comes through the heart and the soul? Exactly. So,
good point.
That's where I think we need to be, is to really assess, okay, what's in the heart and what's in the soul, and what feels like a telepathic message from a spirit versus an alien versus the military versus a targeted individual technology.
Yep. And would you consider that, if we had to, or if you had to give all the listeners a formula of how to be a little bit more discerning, shall we say, would you say that it's more of what you feel and experience through the heart as opposed to through the mind, or do you have a better way of expressing that?
Well, I think each individual may have different strengths and weaknesses of their own perceptive abilities. Some people, let's say, are more kinesthetic. They feel things in their bodies. That's kind of an intuitive knowing. Some people are empathic emotionally, and some people are more mental and visual.
Right.
And may get images and visions. So, so I would say stick with your body tends to tell you things, and your heart. So I would say that telepathy, you have to be careful. You really do.
Yeah.
And then what you can do is also, do an experimental test. And this is what we used to do in the early support group days. We decided, we were having a lot of psychic connections with one another, didn't really understand why. It's like, let's say it's somebody you just met, and there's really no reason to have such a strong connection with someone, but you do, and you wonder why. And so we, would have mutually shared dreams, or we would do these psychic experiments with one another, and then, test, did you receive this message? I'm going to send this message and see if you get it. And so we did these experiments and, analyzed each other's dreams to find out, we were having mutually shared dreams of what I felt were alien abductions on more, it could be subtle levels of reality, or it could be physical, depending on how the person perceived it. But basically, we were able to confirm that we had mutually shared dreams and could pass along messages psychically in our dream state, or our lucid dream state. But the aliens could also inject messages through their virtual reality technology,
right,
and make you get like remote viewing images, for example, of a person. So that made it difficult.
Wow.
But you have to really confirm and check with one another like you would a scientific experiment, and that takes being pretty courageous to say, well, gee, I had a dream, and this is what happened in the dream, and I'm really wanting to see, was this a true astral connection, or was it just me? And just checking in with the person to find out if there was a correlation. And that's what we did in the support group, and with certain pairs of people who were willing to work together.
Gotcha.
And in fact, we did get definite connections.
Yeah.
So definite connections do happen on these other levels of consciousness all the time. But the question is, who's manipulating this and who's orchestrating some of these virtual reality things? And that does happen. And a lot of times in the Milab experiences, and also the aliens will, put imagery on screens for you to watch sometimes. And, whether or not they're showing you the truth or they're just trying to elicit an emotional response. So
that's absolutely right. Interesting. What about alien? Is it called parasitism?
Yes.
Can we go into that, because that's an interesting topic?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that actually probably was mentioned. I'm sure some early researchers have noted this, but they weren't really I think it was Richard Thompson with Alien Identities. Way back in the early 90s wrote a book about the alien abduction encounter phenomena and how they may perceive themselves as aliens as alter identities. And this is something that has come up where people, think, I feel like I'm an alien in these other lifetimes, or as an alter personality kind of situation when, say, they're on the ship and they dream that they were an alien doing this. And so Dr. Malanga actually found that out, that people would have memories that correlated with alien technology. They would have all this, scientific knowledge as if it was downloaded in their head, that it was part of the active alien memory. So it was part of a alien parasite kind of situation that was going on.
Interesting.
So he found that was happening in almost all the cases of alien abduction, where they have what he calls an active alien memory. And whether or not it's active or passive depends on what you can do, let's say in a therapeutic liberation technique, to remove the power, the spirit component of the alien, so that the will of the alien cannot be acted through you within this alien parasite that's already embedded within the brain mind of the person. So, I mean, you could have advanced information like alien languages, for example, or understanding alien script. People can, alien abductees have reported, they know how to speak these other languages, and then they're just speaking alien languages and don't know how they ever learned, or advanced scientific or physics information. So there's that kind of thing going on, and that's been going on for years. So what Malanga actually discovered was that the aliens are actually a parasitical type of transdimensional intelligence. And they also work within the abduction realm, where they could literally take you out of your environment and affect you and do what they do medically, physically, and other ways, and then pop you right back into your reality. So the physical abductions really do happen. It's not just in someone's dream or virtual reality. There really is both going on. Wow. So one of the really good articles that Malanga wrote, that I have on my website, but it's also on his, is called The Physics of Abductions, and I just posted it on Facebook the other day. But he talks about, how he, through quantum theory of understanding time, that they literally freeze your time in your reality, and as if they can come through. Let's say if time is like a videotape that has many different frames, and let's say infinite frames, but in between each frame is a space. And so what they do is they move in between the spaces of the frame of time that you're in, and then they'll move along that same rate of time to meet you, and then basically take you out of that frame, while the rest of reality around you, who is sentient living consciousness, has to go along with the flow of time, and just goes along with the flow of time. So literally your time is stopped, but other people's times continue. So what they remember in their memories is some really odd, bizarre things, like it's like everybody's frozen in time, or the people who were in their environment before disappear, shadowy, like they're no longer there, but the physical environment that they took them from is still there. So I guess his theory was that they could literally freeze frame your time, your local time, and then take you out of that frame, and then do whatever they do in another dimensional reality outside of time, like within the spaces of those video clips, so to speak. And then once they're done, they reinsert you back into that time. And sometimes time does pass, a half hour, a couple of hours, but it's amazing how they can do this. And sometimes you can come back before you left, because they put you back before.
Wow.
So it does happen physically, and it doesn't just happen in a bedroom environment. There's abductions where, they're taken in their car while they're on the freeway,
yep.
Or in an elevator in a hospital or on a train, so in broad daylight kind of things. So those things happen, but I don't think you hear about that as often as you do is the bedroom encounter kind of situation. So
interesting. So quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt. Because I just wanted to make sure that the audience gets a picture of who's causing this. Because we're talking about aliens, and it's very generalized,
Oh, okay.
So what kind of aliens? I mean, are we talking about? Are we talking about the Greys? Are we talking about the reptilians? Are we talking about a combination of others that we haven't even mentioned here? So what is your experience with the people that you've been interviewing, etc.? What is the main player here?
Well, I think the main ones are the alien greys, or the different species within the ones that look like greys, or the big black-eyed types. I remember there was one that I investigated way back in San Diego years ago that I wrote about in the same article. I guess, it was another article, but it was about a woman who was taken from her car and saw a craft that she said looked as big as a city, which was really unusual, like in the sky.
Wow.
And she was taken, and she was on her way to an appointment, and then I think she was late for an hour or two from her appointment, very disoriented. Next several days had a bad headache, her nose bled, she was disoriented with respect to the perception of time, which is common. Her body was on fast forward, but the time around her seemed to go around slowly, and then her fingernails grew faster than normal. That's another one of the weird symptoms after abduction. She needed less sleep. She'd sleep 3 or 4 hours in the night and feel like a whole night had passed. Wake up with an implant. And this particular woman was interesting. She remembered very tall, thin grays, which were almost like a tall white type of species, but very, very thin and spindly with the big black eyes.
Right.
And one of the things that I thought was interesting in that particular case, she remembered seeing other people in the abduction, other people. So there was a group abduction going on where many people were in some kind of hospital-like environment, either on the craft, in hospital gowns, which was interesting, like something was being done. And in her experience, this woman named Marcia, I'll call her, she intuitively understood in her dream that this particular abduction was, quote, a harvest. I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
And then what she was shown later, this is typical of it. I don't know if she's shown this during the abduction. She had frightening apocalyptic dreams about mass destruction, like following that abduction. In one dream, she observed what was left of a large city, like San Diego, for example. And then like people walking around dazed, like this big destruction kind of scene, apocalyptic scene. And then these aliens walking around in black capes, and they were the same ones that took her, and in her mind she knew that they were the new police. And that was really creepy.
Yeah, that is
and
creepy.
It was like one of these situations where she was told to store like soda crackers and food and water because people would be foraging for food. So it was one of these highly emotional apocalyptic scenarios being shown to them, and that's a common theme that does happen, the whole apocalyptic thing. So in her case, it was like one of these tall alien grays, but more of a tall white gray. And then in Malanga's work, in one of his articles that I put on my site about the alien hierarchies, he said there was mostly like 12 different species that were reported mostly, although there's many more than that. And then within that 12, there was, let's say, 6 main ones that he identified as being the most prevalent. And that also what he did is he put them in a hierarchy of power based on what they discovered within many hypnotic regressions, talking with the soul components of the people. So, the Greys would be, let's say, at the bottom of the list, the cyborgs and the EBEs that do a lot of the physical abduction work where they take you. Those are the lower level workers.
Okay.
And then he talked about these orange tans, and then the Nazi frog reptilians, which was kind of interesting. There's many different species of reptilians and saurians, by the way.
Right.
And the insectoids and the mantises, a little bit higher on the hierarchy. And then what he calls the incorporeal beings, like the Lux being, which is actually a light being from our universe that doesn't have a body, but needs our body to parasite.
Okay.
And he thinks it's associated actually with Lucifer, which I thought was interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
This particular one. And then he calls the Growl, which is a six-fingered blonde. And I believe this is the one that there's a picture on my site where it's the one in a white robe, often seen in white robes, blonde hair. I don't know if it's always blonde hair. And this one has like a widow's peak hairline, and it's wearing a six-pointed star medallion. And that was one of the things that was common with that particular type of entity, which he thinks was really a cyborg type of body that used this form in a, Nordic blonde type of figure, but it was really a cyborg body that was inhabited by one of these dark shadow beings that he calls the Growl. And they're actually a shadow being from another dark universe that you will use these forms to inhabit in order to interact with us in our dimensional reality. So it's kind of complex, to be honest with you. It's in terms of the parasitism and how and why they interact and why they use these different forms.
Yeah. Did he ever go into that, into detail about the dark universe? Did he ever go into that with you? Or?
He used a scientific model where there was, let's say, 3 different axes with one commonality of consciousness. Let's say there was a time axis, there's an energy axis, there's a power and space axis, and consciousness. So that it's basically a 3-dimensional cube axis that could be defined scientifically and geometrically. And there's up, down, and one side above the, let's say, 0 point would be the positive universe, and the other side is the negative universe. And so basically the beings he described came from, let's say, the other universe, so that there's a positive light universe that we live in, this like our normal universe, and then there's a dark universe that some of these other beings come into our universe and parasitize us. So there's these dark energy beings that he calls the Horus Ra figure, and the Growl, which is the one that can be in the cyborg Nordic form, who wears the 6-pointed star. Those are the dark shadow entities from the dark universe, whereas the Lux being associated with Lucifer actually comes from our light universe. And I guess the story behind the Lux being was that, based on what people reported in their sessions that he did, that the Lux being originally had a body but lost its body, which contained, I guess the human body can attract the soul. The soul frequency is compatible with the human body. So we're like soul entrapped containers. So the Lux being lost its container, its body that can contain its soul. So it's running around basically like soulless to parasitize us, because it lost its ability to connect with the soul. And it's kind of an unusual story, but that's what Malanga basically found. That's why they have to parasitize, because they have a lack or a disconnect with the soul essence of which we have, which is one of the main reasons why they abduct and parasitize, because they have to use the soul energy to continue their life form and their memories of their civilization through us.
Wow. Now, are these similar to or identical to the Nordics that George Kavasilis talks about, or are they different?
Well, let's say the cyborg Nordic type he calls a Growl, and it's a 6-fingered type. And I actually think the 6-fingered ones, I wondered, I don't know if Malanga would say this, that the 6-fingered ones might be related to the Nephilim, because the Nephilim were reported to have 6 fingers and 6 toes, whereas there's another Nordic type that is just a regular 5-fingered one, and then there's different ones reported, like the Andromedans and the Pleiadians, and then there's some that are actually like clones that are just doing a job for the reptilians, and sometimes you'll see the Nordics in association with the reptilians. So it depends on the person's experience. So it's not really clear,
Interesting.
So it makes it very difficult. So I think people should get, if they can, they get hypnotic regressions to get really clear on their experiences, if they can, do their own healing process and personal growth work to get clearer and clearer on what their experiences are, instead of what they want them to be or what they're afraid of them to be. So really, this is why I interviewed the people that I did, was that It's something that James Bartley and I had, we had talked about even on our earlier show. It said, it's better to have a handful of 5, 6, 10 lucid abductees and Milabs who are really clear because they're psychic and they're clear and they're spiritual warriors and they're fighters and they're, to have their testimonies versus, 100 to 1,000 of people who are struggling to remember, who are still afraid or they're still in denial, haven't done their personal growth work, haven't done enough regressions or therapy to really remember clearly. So the popular opinion is probably not the truth. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be better to go with the people who are more clear and who do have this, superior psychic ability and lucidity. And that means they can dream lucidly and become lucid in their dreams and their virtual reality experiences if they're being imposed upon them. So that's why it's hard to know the truth.
I know, right?
Which is why in Malanga's work, he found out a way to, the best way to get accurate information is to go directly to the soul component of the person, which is that part of us that is the most divine part of us that lives beyond time and space and can live in past, present, and future all at the same time. And it's a part of us that has the power, actually, the spiritual power and the memory. So he has to find a way to work with this, like in a neurolinguistic fashion, using archetypal language to the direct connect with that part of ourselves. And then ask that part of ourselves in deep relaxation or trance to give the whole story, which is sometimes a very emotional experience because what the conscious mind believed may not be the truth, and there may be a lot of feelings associated with that cognitive dissonance of believing something that they thought was true that was not true.
Right.
And so, you have to deal with the therapeutic process as well when you're dealing with this, and that most people don't want to go there. Most people do not want to go there.
Yeah.
They will not go there. I mean, that's why I don't like dealing with the UFO community so much, is that, this for me is about personal growth and spiritual awareness and spiritual wisdom and integrity, and we're fighting a war.
Yep.
And this is not about entertainment and who's popular or who's the best New Age channeler. It just doesn't work like that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if this is like taking this thing to, completely off topic or whatever, but I just wanted to get your honest opinion, because I'm pretty sure maybe you've done a lot of introspection, and I know that you are an Anusara yogi, and you're into, obviously you've done your own spiritual homework and whatnot. What is your opinion of whether there is darkness or not? A lot of people have the opinion that it's, and maybe in the highest realm, of course, as Prime Creator, maybe everything is together, it's the all that is. But what is your opinion? Do you believe that there is darkness? And I'm not talking about the color dark. I'm talking about darkness.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I mean, I've experienced it. What it feels like in this particular experience, it's for all practical purposes, it's real on this duality experience on planet Earth. It is very real. And
do you equate that to evil, or is that a totally separate thing altogether?
Well, no, I think there's two things. I think there's, maybe the same. They say ignorance is darkness, because if one was truly not ignorant, they wouldn't be carrying out evil activities, because they would realize the connection between all and how we harm ourselves by harming others. And so really there is a kind of blind ignorance. And that kind of actually goes back to the creation of the demiurge, or the Yalta-Baoth in the Gnostic literature.
Right.
How this being was created through an anomalous impact of the planets or the Eon Sophia in the Dema material of the galactic limbs when she took her plunge, and it created this anomalous being. And it's kind of a complex story in and of itself. John Lash is the one who could explain all that. But the demiurge would be like an animated life form that came anomalously, but it's like a incomplete kind of being that is ignorant of its true origin. And so it's like a psychopathic cosmic being that believes it really is the creator of its own universe, but it's really the false universe and false hierarchies that it actually encompasses this whole planetary system.
Right.
And so a lot of our religions have been completely corrupted by this demiurge and his hierarchy in this false light system, which George Kavasilis talks about. And that, so we're so inundated with the false systems, it's hard to know what the truth is, because we've only known the corruptions for so long, except for a few people who've realized that the deeper truths. So it's actually this demiurgic being, which is kind of an anomalous psychopath cosmic being, who is truly ignorant of its origin and who its true mother and father is, or who the originator is, or who the one true non-dual God consciousness of all is. Maybe it doesn't know what that is.
Yeah.
But there's people who can realize those higher levels of consciousness, let's say like Dzogchen Buddhists or Ati Yoga practitioners, where they fully understand the whole non-duality of everything. But, if you want to be realistic about spiritual perceptions, while we're still here on earth in this duality, evil exists and darkness exists, and there is a war of the dark and the light, and we're caught in between this, and I don't think it's a fair game. I really don't.
I agree.
In my view, I mean...
Oh, well, it's my view as well. At least two of us are in agreement.
Yeah, and I think shamanic practitioners of the indigenous cultures and oral lineages, they tend to have an interesting view of life where they understand the connectedness, but they deal directly with, let's say, the planetary animal mother, the divine intelligence of the mother, or plant spirits and animal spirits of different archetypal energies, and then work with that to help heal others and be able to see, let's say, causes and effects of people's diseases or what's going on in their lives to help heal them. And they're able to see all these different levels. Let's say they're still in duality, but they're able to see at higher levels still within the duality system and be able to help. And they're like intermediaries. So, I mean, I think for all practical purposes, we still have a lot of darkness on earth, and that you try to, I don't know, I'm not perfectly enlightened, so what can I say? I mean, I'm not some yogi
right, neither
who
are we.
Control everything or whatever. But I do practice yoga. Not only, you mentioned Anusara, which now we just call it alignment-based yoga, and it's kind of based on alignment and insight, body movement, which is really fantastic. It helps you understand awareness of energies in your body and how that connects with other levels, and Ashtanga yoga too. So that's very helpful in terms of increasing one's awareness on different levels and alignment with that, and understanding what alignment with that is and what not alignment is, and feeling in your body and in different energies. So
right.
I think it helps in terms of a spiritual path, personally.
Absolutely. Why do you feel, or even if you've thought about it, because I notice it a lot, but have you noticed that there are so many different people that are in the spiritual community with so many different opinions and belief systems, and I think it's getting even more divided every day. Am I crazy, or are you experiencing this as well? Because I'm about to slit my wrist.
I'm laughing. No, because I've been running across this too. Maybe it's because we're in the alternative community and hear a lot of different radio show guests and people sending you a link after link. Oh, you got to watch this video. You got to watch this. You got to look at this article. And pretty soon you get so inundated with all these different people who have all these different views of spirituality and dimensions and this and that, and pretty soon it's just like everything goes in a blender in your head. You say, just I don't want any more. You have to just sit and center with the truth inside your own being and your own heart and your own soul, and set with that, and it gets crazy.
I know.
A lot of this you don't know where it really comes from, and do these people have a lineage, and is this a lineage that you could trust, or is it just some download from some alien stuff or some channeled material? And I hear things all the time, and they sound wonderful, they sound good, but it almost seems like it makes you more confused. I totally agree. And I think we're, it's not to get biblical on anybody, but, these are pretty much a sign of the times. I mean, we're in a time frame where there's so much information, especially because of the internet. That everything is so available at instantaneously, that we're able to get so much information. But again, we don't know where that's coming from and who's giving it, where they're getting it from. And so it's scary, because a lot of people will swear by the information they have. And I was just wondering what you thought. it's interesting because something came up for me in a dream the other night, and I think it was actually a message from what I call divine wisdom, the organic light, so to speak. And it's really because discernment has become such a huge issue now. When I know what's going on with the aliens and alien technology and alien parasitism and the archontic parasitism and the artificial telepathy and all these messages that people are getting, and the psychic messages and the psychic linking that's going on, let's say, between abductees and aliens, and how you can discern. And so what came up in a dream for me was kind of going back to the source and going back to what can we go back to give us a truthful discernment. It would be going back to original nature and things that exist naturally in nature to give us a better guide for how to go back to the source of truth and to what is the organic light, what is the organic truth. And so what was shown to me was the term mycelium, which means, I guess it's a type of fungus, or the vegetative part of a fungus that interlinks and has an intelligent network of response and perception. And so it could actually, it's like a organic internet network information system of communication,
similar to
nature.
Similar to the Avatar movie where the roots were communicated.
Exactly. So even like in plant spirit medicine that shamans are known to partake in, because it's a gift from the natural divine intelligence of the living planet, which is a living intelligent being that is entrapped within this form of the earth, which is actually different from a lot of other planetary systems according to the Sophianic narrative of the Gnostic story that John Lash has elaborated on.
Sure.
So Earth is actually very unique in that the planet is a living aeon entity, God, in the intelligence of the earth, but solidified, so that her communication to us can tell us our true history if we know how to connect with that, and that there are shamans and medicine people who can connect with that natural memory through imbibing in plant medicine, or just connecting with that through their own shamanic journey.
Okay.
And so there's certain plants that the wisdom, divine intelligence, divine wisdom of Sophia will give us, let's say like certain mushrooms, or like mycelium, for example, or like ayahuasca, and that is a living intelligence that can teach us. It's a sentient being. And so you can learn divine wisdom of the organic way of life through these plants. And so if we go back to nature, we can get back to more of an organic understanding of life and connection with divinity, or with that part of us.
Gotcha.
So because now, everything's getting so, contaminated with GMOs and with nanotechnology, and so we're having a hard time discerning. We're getting information, let's say, the internet information, we're being bombarded, but, the internet itself is actually a technology that could be considered partially archontic, even though it's good. We're getting information, we're being able to communicate with each other, but there's also unusual things about the internet, which some spiritual practitioners knew years ago, that has to do with alien technology and how that alien hive mind is actually infiltrating our reality and our mind and our world through artificial technology, even the internet.
That's right.
So we need to go back to nature in terms of what would be a natural internet. That would be like certain forms of mycelium. And so that's what I was told, and it was kind of a way of getting back to organic nature and light and wisdom, so that we have to keep going back to the core of where we came from. We are of the earth. We are not, some people, they're always like going up to the sky and the stars, and they're ETs, and they have this cosmic origin, and they may be in a larger sense, but without the connect with the earth, I don't think that they could have the discernment and the grounding to really be able to know what they're really communicating with.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think the shamanic path is kind of neat. If there's shamans who are good and they're really connected divinely to help others, then they're going to have a direct connect with earth that's more grounded and rooted in the truth in some ways.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's coming off planet.
Exactly.
If there's ETs are coming off planet, they're hacking into our reality, and it's just hard to know. So we need to find a way to connect with our own self and our own heart and our own organic, where we came from, those roots of us, which we're still part of.
Yeah.
To connect with the truth, and so that we'll have a reference point always within.
Yeah, because it looks like it's almost like a deliberate thing that is happening now with why there's so many differences of opinion, and why. I mean, if we really were to look at the dark forces, how they operate, Eve, and I'm sure you've observed this as well. It looks extremely organized, extremely on the same page, whereas the light community or the spiritual community seems to be all over the place with differences of opinion and whatnot. And it almost looks like it's a deliberate attempt by the dark forces, not even an attempt, and actually they've been very successful in this divide and conquer, shall we say, where they're infiltrating all kinds of different belief systems. You might have 100 million ways of looking at Buddhism, 100 million ways of looking at Christianity, looking at New Age, looking at this and looking at that, and nobody seems to be on the same page about anything. And so I think that, in my opinion, is to kind of like let go of all of it and do exactly what you're saying. Just connect with nature and just be connected directly with the mother. I think that would be probably the best way to do that. I think
so too. Mm-hmm. It's because it gets to the point where it gets just absolutely crazy with all this information overload, and this book and that book and this speaker and that speaker and this researcher and that, I get bombarded all the time, and it's to the point where I'm just like, let me go run in the forest and hide for like several months.
I know. So with that, what do you think? Because obviously the whole program today is about Milabs and super soldiers. Of course, we don't always have to go into that every time we speak because there's so much more to this puzzle. To this. Yeah. But what do you feel, other than being directed to Mother Earth and all? I mean, is there light at the end of the tunnel with all this alien agenda and alien infestation and downright taking over our will or our free will? Is there anything that you feel that will happen to trigger a change?
Well, I believe there is a light at the end of the tunnel for sure. We are the light, and we are the tunnel. Let's say that it is within us, and that we have to really, focus and listen to a deeper inner natural organic process, instead of getting entertained by the idolatry of these extraterrestrial gods and all this other fancy stuff that's the popular flavor of the week. I do think that people have to be aware and humble, like they have to have this humble ability to let go of what they think they are, what they want to be, or what they're afraid of, and let go of even how they're perceived in society, and let go of those things in order to allow a deeper truth to emerge from within them. And that could be a real painful process. It's almost like what I would call a shamanic initiation. That has to happen at some point, to let go of all these other external constructs and belief systems that we've held onto that have been corrupted. And many of us, we just don't even know how corrupted it is, and we have no reference point. It's like we're floating around without a ground. We have no reference point to even go to anymore. Some people are just so lost, and I don't know. I sense that a lot of people are lost and feeling hopeless, and with the bombardment of dark energies. And I don't think it's hopeless, though, but I do think we need to have a unification based on a deeper connection that is central to all of us. Like, let's say, a natural mycelium. If we can all connect deeply to the root source of our origin as humans on this planet, then we will be able to connect with one another more organically without the need for the internet or the telephone. And I mean, that would be ideal.
That would be awesome.
And that's something that I suppose some cultures and some communities can do, but I like to go back to certain parallels in history, like something that James Bartley has taught me is, look at what happened in World War II, and when France, for example, when France got taken over by the Nazis, and they call it the passive resistance movement, And that even though they were in occupied territory of the enemy and they had to follow the laws and orders of the perpetrators, a lot of people just, made mistakes. They just couldn't meet those obligations. Oh, I guess it's an accident, and they just passively resisted. And so we need to maybe develop a form of passive resistance that doesn't really draw too much attention to get constantly slammed and attacked, but in such a way that the dark agenda just doesn't happen, because the deep core of who we are is so opposed to that evil that we cannot and will not cooperate.
Correct.
And it has to come from a deep place inside, and and that comes, sometimes that comes as a really uncomfortable feeling inside. It's not all love and light, you know what I mean? It's not like all be airy-fairy and kind and sappy to each other in some new agey kind of way. I mean, sometimes it means getting very, very angry and just saying no to something that is so disturbing and so disgusting to you that you just cannot and will not put up with it anymore.
Right.
It's that's how pissed off you have to get, and I guess some people need to get angry. And I don't think violence is necessarily the right thing, but I think there's a lot of people who are so depressed, like women. I mean, I speak with a lot of women who, they're depressed and feel powerless, but they don't access their anger.
Right.
They don't know how to access their anger. Or sometimes people they can't even access the feelings they have of, let's say, a lifetime of manipulation or abductions, or if they were in a bloodline that where they're being constantly harassed because of the bloodline, and sometimes they just don't know. They don't know how to access because the pain is so deep, and they don't have the support networks to process that. And so that's something that I actually and another friend, another 4 people, we're developing something called Rise Multiversity, which is the idea started that we really wanted to have more support in an international way where people could talk deeper about these issues and what they're going through in a way that could really work with each other and network and support with each other in an online way. They may not be able to get together physically, but there's a way that they can get that kind of support and connection with one another and understanding the deeper issues and wanting to go much deeper than, let's say, a lot of the radio shows are going, where you get the information, but we need solutions. We need concrete, connective, interactive, supportive, therapeutic, in a big way, in a way we can connect all over.
Absolutely.
Because there's people who are like in foreign countries where, they can't talk to anybody about their experiences, and they've had one of these like nasty love bites, or they've been harassed all their life, or they're having alien manipulation. And there's no reason why we can't develop these support networks even physically, but it's a hard thing to do because they're few and few between right now, I guess. So that's what we want to do, is we want to develop like she calls it a multiversity as opposed to a university, where
I love it.
Education and, let's say, video conferencing that's interactive, or we could take courses online and then from that develop other smaller network groups where you can really do the deep work.
Yeah.
Because the deep work needs to be done.
It does.
Because what I see, in many people is there's a lot of people that, a lot of times the reason why they come to me is because they have this like manipulated relationship, or something strange is going on that never really happened to them before, and they didn't really know, and it turns out that they have a history. They may have an alien visitation history that they really weren't fully aware of, but let's say this manipulated relationship with one of these psychic vampire host characters really threw them into such pain that they had to basically reassess their history. So I see that there's a lot of people who report things to me, but they really don't know their history. They haven't gone deep enough to really know what's happening and why this is happening and where it was accessed in their lifetime. So there has to be deeper work done.
Do they undergo hypnosis to get to that deeper work, or is it on their own introspection and that type of thing?
It could be both. But I'd say that I think people want the support, but there's a fear of going deeper. They don't know how to go deep. And part of that problem, let's say within the alien abduction experience, where it's happened to you your whole life and it's just part of your life, you never knew anything different, right? Is that the aliens could create this disconnect between your mind, your spirit, and your soul, like what Dr. Malanga has found, and that because of that disconnect, we're losing this awareness of soul, which has the awareness of what's happening and the awareness of the true depth of your being. So we have to reconnect with that, create the connection to get the fullness of memory. We're not only working through the trauma to get the memory, and then once we get the memory, you reconnect with yourself, which is the power and, ethics and everything. Mm-hmm. So we're basically a lot of people who are disconnected from themselves and don't even know it because they've been so inundated with the counterfeit and with the disconnection that they don't have a reference point for the truth, even within them.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're falling after every single, flavor of the week that comes their way.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So.
Wow. That is crazy. Did you want to go any further into Dr. Malanga's work while we're still, on this series? Or
well, let's see. What I could do is I thought I could talk about that. I could also talk about something that was real interesting that I felt compelled to write about, and that was some researcher had wanted to do an article on owl synchronicities and how often the owl archetype comes up within the alien experiencer lifetime.
Okay.
But it also comes up in other ways. And so what I did is I wrote an article about owl synchronicities, UFO experiencers, and reverse speech. And so I could pull it up on my website. And I guess what I found is that the owl archetype came up frequently within reverse speech phrases of people who were talking about their alien encounters or their dreams, or in reference to seeing a light associated with an experience. And, what does that owl archetype mean, and why is it showing up? And, what other methods does it show up? Like, let's say shamans can have that as a power animal or a power ally, or it come up in an animal medicine card spread, for example. And so how that associated with the aliens, and why reverse speech is coming up with that, and what's so fantastic about reverse speech. And so years ago, I actually did an interview with David Oates. This was like way back in the year, I don't even know if it was before 2000, but I had a friend who was also an alien abductee experiencer who did her own reverse speech analysis.
Okay.
She had one of those reverse recorders that reversed audio tapes. In those days, I suppose they now have computer programs that can do that. Mm-hmm. So we decided to do several reversals on conversations that she had with other experiencers and ourselves, and then analyze what she found in reverse speech patterns. And so I also interviewed David Oates, who was basically the famous one at the time, who came out with the book called Reverse Speech, and some of the things that he discovered about reverse speech. So I interviewed him not only about many of the questions about reverse speech, but his own UFO experience, which was in the same town that I lived in at the time.
Okay.
And then he did a reversal on, some phrases on that, and how reverse speech is actually language in and of itself is an interesting part of. Well, interesting, and that language is forwards and backwards naturally, which is interesting because it reflects duality.
Right.
That's how we have positive and negative, yin and yang, good and evil, what's apparent on the outside, what's apparent on the inside. And so outer language, like what we hear all the time, is what's in our conscious minds and what we want to present outwardly to the world. And sometimes it's very authentic with what we're feeling and who we are inside. But oftentimes in reverse, you will get more of an archetypal soul-to-soul communication.
Okay, right.
So this is what's interesting, is because if that's true, which he believes it is, and I believe it is to a certain degree, but it's just hard to detect and learn that. You have to be really good at that to be able to tell the reverse phrases that come up.
Okay.
So basically it's a truth detector. So you can tell, like, what is the soul to soul communication going on between these conversations. And so is what we're saying, what we believe to be happening, let's say with respect to an alien abduction experience, is that really true? Did I really see, an alien in a craft, and or was it something else? So what David Oates found is that, of course, archetypal language does emerge in reverse speech, and with mythical metaphors, like owl, for example, or he would say things like Lancelot's sword, or the one, or Satan, or Samson's soul, like the term soul would come up. And so when Pat Mason is the one who did the reverse speech, when we did things, she came up with certain metaphors that would come up repeatedly, like the owl archetype. And so I could even read to you some things that are on my blog post that I thought were interesting.
Oh, yes, please.
And the way they show up, you have to really analyze it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say, he had a UFO experience, and so he had a reversal from that. And one of the archetypes that came up I thought was interesting. I'm not sure what it means, but he talks about how, I'll just read you the forward phrase. I'll just read you some of the stuff from the blog post. And he says, "This is the true one. It happened to me last week. I will never forget this until the day I die." And the reversal was, it was so big, the craft. And he says, "I got a house on top of a hill. You could see right down to the coastline. It's a beautiful place." And then in reverse, he says, "Believe me." And he said, "So I walked out of the house. I'll never forget this. It was the most incredible thing." And reversal, it says, "They pull you with Samson's soul. Have to recognize it was so big." And I thought, well, that's interesting. That was like one of those archetypal metaphors that will come up. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions I asked him was that, well, gosh, what about spiritual growth? And, do enlightened people have, interesting reverse phrases that are coming up? Or can you tell, like, do spiritual mysteries come through? And he claimed that they did. He said that was one of his personal interests. And the reverse speech basically describes the state of the soul. And that's really important in terms of alien abduction. Uh-huh. Because if they're, let's say, feeding on your soul, will that be reflected in reverse speech?
Interesting.
So I'll just read you some, one of the things that he said I thought was really interesting. He said, "In the deep unconscious, there are prime metaphors. We know that's true. At the base of the structure of the psyche and all human behavior, thought, and emotion is instigated by metaphors, like mythical metaphors and archetypes. They have a life in their own right." And this is something that Steve Richards of Holographic Kinetics mentioned, how these archetypes are like living entities, and even thought forms could become living entities, especially when they're unresolved or repressed. Mm-hmm. So the metaphors, they create behavior, and the way they interact with each other depends on the behavior that's created. So David Oach would say that the way they interact with each other depends on what behavior is created by these archetypes. And there's two different kinds. He calls structural archetypes, structural metaphors and archetypal metaphors. And the operational metaphors are how the archetype operates. And he said, let's suppose there's someone who has 3 structural metaphors that say wolf, goddess, and Satan, because these things have come up before. He said the wolf is a hunter and protector. Satan is aggressive and angry. And then he says goddess is hope for the future. And I put that in bold. I said, well, that's interesting. I think that's true. Goddess is hope for the future. Uh-huh. And I said, well, that's interesting. And when one considers the wisdom goddess, because, that is Sophia, wisdom. And that is hope for our future in terms of connection with that, I believe, that we have to connect with that basic part of ourselves. So anyway, so I'll just go to some of the reversals that me and Pat Mason had found in a conversation we had in relation to Alien Encounter. And I published this in a magazine, in the same Alien Encounters English magazine in 1998 sometime. And so the forward phrase was, she's saying, oh, that's interesting. Maybe the UFO investigator who were in question was too embarrassed to have another woman abductee call or something, because he wouldn't take her calls. And it was a discussion about a particular abductee who was having experiences, who called this investigator, but he wasn't answering her calls. Okay. And I don't know. We were just talking about that. And then I thought it was a reversal here showing the soul truth-speaking mysteries. The reversal was, God throw off to move in with the mystery of mysteries. Teach babies to set that up. That was the reversal of that phrase. Huh. And then another reversal, I say, here the abductee is describing how within the alien abduction phenomena there's a truth-detracting element to keep people distracted away from the truth. We can see the archetype of the wolf emerging in this particular woman's phrase. And so forward, she said, part of it is truth detracting, trying to get people away from, and then the reversal was, my fair wolf speaking up. He passed his truth to the girl. And then another reversal, it says, well, because the more information, the less fear, Yeah. And the reversal was, find the area of 7, the chamber filled with the choir. And I felt that was a spiritual mystery that is a deep archetypal place that we go to find the truth. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the astral realm, who knows. And another reversal was, oh, I don't know. All I have is a weird dream memory about an abduction, right? And the reversal was, well, they amend these dreams. If they make them, I'm learning. Yeah, and then she says, I'll just go with the conversation. I guess psychically, the girl saw something like a reptilian alien, psychically with a third eye, but I didn't see it and she saw it. And the reversal was, in the darkness, we seem to help the aliens.
Wow.
And then another phrase, forward, she says, well, because she remembers an orange light, right? And a lot of times before an abduction or encounter, you see these glowing orbs of light. An orange light is a common one. And then the reversal was care. The owls knew it was their memory ship. So there was the owl metaphor.
Yep.
And then it had come up in other places. Let me just finish this dialogue. And she said, forward, yes, because I have, and the reversal was right on the gray. And the gray, I think, is a gray alien, like a metaphor.
Right.
The forward, the person says, well, the truth is the truth. It needs to be there, And the reversal was, why in the gray deep seed? They pierced us, hey. Which is, I thought it was a metaphor for the grays and their deep parasitism and infestation in our world. And they pierced us. Like they literally, like the archontic parasites pierced us in our mind.
Yep.
That's how I see that metaphor coming up.
Wow.
And then there was some other ones that Pat Mason did with a woman who actually I worked with years ago who had fluorescence showing up on her body. And that was something that we really didn't talk about, but I can talk about that after this. But one of the ways to check, let's say if you think you've had an abduction and you had a weird dream and you wake up feeling exhausted, you may have marks, you had weird dreams, and you feel like, okay, I think something happened, you get this black light and you check your body. And sometimes fluorescent different colors will show up on different parts of your body, sometimes in tattoo markings or just splash marks or where they touch you or handle you, it will come up fluorescent. So I guess we were talking about fluorescence and this whole abduction experience that this woman had named Mary. So the forward phrase was, well, yeah, there were more than, there were probably about, she was talking about the aliens, and then her reversal says, I got worth. Then who are they? Like the aliens. And then the forward was pretty lights, because she saw lights before that. That's often the case. And then the reversal says, the owl lead her. And then forward, she said, he took me, like, into the ship. And then the reversal said, he who pushed it. And the forward phrase, and having this face with these two eyes, and I guess she's describing the alien. And the reversal says, see owl, wishes you could see it, send me back a net. And Mary is wondering about the fluorescence in this later phrase. She says, can it be normal? And then the reversal says, no mere image, is it? And Mary is talking about her therapist. She's talking about showing her therapist this glow under a black light, and the forward phrase is, under the black light. And the reversal says, the owl called within it. And she's still talking to her therapist, and she was trying to get him to help her get information from the researcher who was analyzing a sample of the fluorescence. And actually, we actually got a sample of the fluorescence and went to send it to some local people they knew in their area, another part of the United States. I don't know if they were part of MUFON, but they had access to some scientific equipment. But I think there was a question as to the integrity based on the reversal, because the reversal says, what the forward phrase said, if he could find out information, right, about the fluorescence, and the reversal says, sham, come out right with it. So it appeared that whatever was going on with the fluorescence analysis might have been a sham in terms of what they found. And I remembered this case because what they finally there was one sample tested. There wasn't enough to get a full analysis, so they said.
Right.
But what they came up with was that they thought that at least one of their fluorescent marks from one of the samples was coumadin, a dye which is found in rat poison. That's what they told her it was. But there, in the reversal, it appears there's something, let's say, not truthful about what came out of that. But I know for a fact that this woman definitely had experiences, and that comes up in her reverse speech with a lot of the owl metaphors.
Interesting.
So
wow.
It's interesting, though, how the owl will come up, in synchronicities as well, and how in the owl medicine cards, the main function or message is deception. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, let's say, the owl is deceiving you. It depends on the concept, the context in which it comes up in your experience. So it could mean, well, can you see behind what is showing? Like, can you see beyond the veil? Or that owls have the ability to see beyond the veil. They could see at night. They're predators at night. So, someone could have that as an animal medicine power, which means they could see. They could see through deception. They could see through people.
Right.
Or they could be a black magician or a sorcerer, and that may also be their animal. So it really depends on the context, is what I'm saying, and how it comes up. And, and what I've noticed, I put in the article, was that, because I did a lot of shamanic training years ago with different people, and did what they call power animal retrieval. And I did get, I'm not going to say which one it was, but I did get one retrieved. And, I was kind of like, yeah, well, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, whatever. But it really did work, and it really was authentic, because it did appear to me several times, in not only in dreams and synchronicities, but in real life, like literally appearing in front of me. And it had a function. And its function, it showed me particularly what its medicine was for me.
Interesting.
So it may not necessarily be exactly what someone will say, let's say in one of these books, where it says, well, this medicine means that. When this comes up in a dream, your own personal experience with that animal power is really what's the important thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That is the most important meaning for you. So that's just what I meant to say on that one. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to expand a little bit on the owl situation, because it's one of those animals that also come up in with the Illuminati. I don't know if you knew that, right?
Oh yeah, Moloch.
Yeah, the Moloch, and so is it also, do you think that it's because, these Illuminati folks also deal with the, negative aliens, that they're also bringing the owl as a symbol for themselves, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I do think. Yeah. I think it's associated with black magic and sorcery, and those who can deceive and who are predators at night. But it could also be that you can see through deception. So, but that it is a common thing for the aliens. If the owl keeps showing up, I see that deception. You got to look at what's presenting and what the real truth is behind their image.
Yeah. And
what are their intentions, their true intentions. And your soul knows. And that's the thing. It's like when you have that soul connection, your soul knows.
Yeah.
So
this reverse speech, how is this done? Is this something that let's say I'm speaking, in a sentence, and then you take the words and you just start speaking them backwards? Or is it, like you play one of those LPs, and then just play it back? Yeah. How is that done?
Well, in the early days, we used audio cassette recorders, and then would get a reverse recorder and then just listen to the phrases and then see what would come up. And you really would have to have an ear for it. And some things would come up really strongly. And I remember asking David Oates, like he said that the higher the content of the higher the emotional content of the conversation, the more reversals will come up. And so when someone has emotional situation going on, the reversals will more likely come up more often in the speech, like every 2 or 3 seconds. Whereas, for example, if you have a well-recited, memorized speech or a story that you've told over and over again, the reversals wouldn't happen as often, or very little or few at all. So that was one thing, that the more emotional the language, the more reversals you'll get. And so you have to have an ear for it.
Gotcha.
And they tend to be shorter phrases in general, with a lot of archetypes. And he said, too, this is what David Oates said, that it's, let's say if someone had a repressed memory of, let's say, sexual abuse or trauma, if it was true, oftentimes what's on the surface of consciousness but not aware will come up exactly as it was, like specifically. And he meant like names or the description of the perpetrator, even bank account numbers.
Wow.
He said that in his interview. And he said, and conversely, if it's, let's say, an internal conflict and maybe it's not really true, then you'll get a lot of the archetypal metaphors, like Lancelot is wounded, or being pierced by the sword, or Satan, or so. like injuries that happen that are metaphorically spoken to the soul that way.
Wow.
So he said that, you can tell the truth, but you have to work with it a lot. And so Pat Mason, my colleague, she was good at this. She did this for months and months and months until she really got an ear for it. And, and John Kelly is actually the one who's done a lot of reverse speech now, and he does a lot of his own radio shows and interviews, and he's been doing this for years. He would be probably a good person to interview in terms of what he's found. And then there was another lady named Peggy Kane who used to do a lot of reverse speech years ago. And Peggy Kane actually did a lot of reverse speech analysis of EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, that she would, I guess, get off different recordings. And then so she came up with some pretty bizarre things years ago where she would hear like disembodied spirits and different truths and phrases that kept coming up over and over again. And she's not really out too much in the public now, but there for a while she was talking a lot about how the reptilians would come through the reverse speech, and mentioning of the net. See, that term came up a lot, like the net, as if it's a astral net or a mind control force or a deceiving kinds of influence that's like enveloping the earth, like the net, or some people call it, there's another name for that, or it's literally an electromagnetic net over the earth. Or something to that effect. And I think she had things come up, like the one would come up a lot.
Wow.
And certain, references to the future. But then a lot of her things didn't pan out in terms of future predictions. And that's why you have to be careful with these things, because, who knows what can come through, So that's why you just have to keep checking it and back and forth, and then just look at patterns that are repeated.
Yep. Interesting.
But I do believe soul-to-soul communication does happen, and that it does happen with imagery and metaphors in our own minds. And we see that in our dreams, so that even in our unconscious body language, we are communicating soul-to-soul all the time.
Yep.
And that now what I'm finding is that there's a lot of people who are very sensitive, psychic, spiritually attuned, and they literally can have soul-to-soul conversations with others on a regular basis.
That's amazing.
And some people may be conscious of it, and some people may not be conscious of it, but you can actually communicate soul to soul, and that is a natural process of actually being human.
Yep.
So we're just not always aware of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eve, I was going to ask you, and I've been meaning to every time that you're on our show, because you mentioned, and I think it was one of the, I think it was the first time that we interviewed you, and then we never went in depth into it, and it was about the werewolf situation. And I've been dying to ask you about that, if you can share with us what that was, because it's like really interesting.
Okay.
Are you okay with sharing that?
Yeah.
Okay,
in fact,
cool.
I know that James had spoken about that on an earlier show, and that I had interviewed someone named White Wolf von Otzigen some months ago, who is a survivor of an MK Ultra assassin super soldier kind of program. And in his program, part of what they created in him based on his inherent capabilities and genetic history and other aspects of what he calls frequency, that he had the ability to tune into the wolf frequency. And then what they did is they kind of tweaked and manipulated here and there to make him be able to tune into and be able to contain the werewolf and the wolf frequency. So he had the wolf frequency based on what he said was previous lifetimes as a wolf, or the ability to shapeshift. And then also this was somehow done, or you can call it genetic manipulation or frequency manipulation, in these high-tech Milabs super soldier programs that deal with the occult. All right, so they do a lot of magic on top of it. So there's magic and what I call black meta technology, or alien technology even.
Okay.
And so he had the ability to shapeshift, basically, but they basically helped him along with that, and then actually, did the werewolf thing where they would do things that would trigger the switching of him to turn into a werewolf, and then use that in certain rituals or ops, depending on what they wanted him to do. And it was not always remembered consciously. He got memories later, which were very, very traumatic.
Wow.
So, but not all people who shapeshift or like used in these programs. It's just that these programs employed black magic and technology to tap into a previously existing, let's say, memory that was part of one of his earlier lifetime kind of things.
Now, this is somebody that you interviewed, or?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah, but I have talked to some people over the years who claim that they saw a werewolf. I mean, I've talked to at least 2 people who've had werewolf encounters, claim to have had werewolf encounters. And one person had it 2 different times, and I don't know if it was witnessed by any more than one person. That was like in Southern California. And the other person was in Arizona who actually saw a wolf man, and her son saw that and even drew a picture of it.
So it's possible that they're having different people going through these processes, right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I believe that this has been happening because I've had reports of others where it would come within the context of, let's say, a past life memory, but they are like someone who was in a project all their life, or they're one of these bloodline people where they were, they already have abilities, but they remember their past lives because they've done a lot of personal work. Okay, so and then their past life memories, they remember, let's say, ancient Atlantis, where they had like a priesthood. Let's say there was an evil priesthood that would. I guess they had advanced gene splicing technology or whatever abilities to create half human, half lions, for example.
Wow.
And so there would be like a lioness human, and they would use these lioness humans to protect the priests and priestesses so they wouldn't get attacked. So they would have these as guards around the temple. And so I guess one of her memories was that she remembered being one of these in a former lifetime, so that she had this frequency in her, I don't know, I won't call it genetic memory, but I would call it in her spiritual frequency memory.
Right.
And so with White Wolf, then it was similar. It was like, he might have been a wolf or a shapeshifter in another life. That was a powerful memory and frequency in his life this time, which is why they, wanted to use him. But he was also in training under a Native American shaman who, helped him understand his gift even supposedly before he even was in the program. So he had the innate abilities that were natural, and then they were exploited, basically. So
interesting.
And I personally know a shaman who, from south of India, who did shapeshift. And in his case, they didn't shapeshift into wolves, but they shapeshifted into dogs. And their particular lineage of shamans, Odias, that they would shapeshift into packs of dogs through the forest, and that they would meet in their dog form in these interdimensional forms. But there were other shamans who could shift into other forms, and then they would have these meetings amongst shamans in their other forms, and so they could shapeshift. So there are all people who can do this, and it's a shamanic practice for some lineages to do that. It's just that in these black op programs now, that they have a lot of black magicians, and they have alien technology. They're able to tune in and find out through your frequency alone. They could even look into, like, say, I think the Akashic records, for example, and to find out, what, let's say, particular lifetime you had where you were, let's say, a hero or a great warrior, or, a werewolf or a lioness or whatever. And then they tap into that frequency, and then they try to hone it and bring it back and basically amplify it, and then under triggers and cues and programmings and trauma, they're able to bring that up again and be able to, basically, you can have an alter personality that could shapeshift into one of these forms. So there's super soldiers who've reported like really bizarre things that you wouldn't even believe. Like, I mean, you see these things on movies, but I tell you, it happened before the movies. Like where they have literally metal claws that can come out of their hands and their toes, and things that come up out of their skin, and then they re-heal after they're done, and they can commit violent acts and not even know what the hell they did, but then they see the scars in their hand where these like metal claw things came out of their wrists and their knuckles. So I mean, I hear things like that where they're able to do these things, and part of the technology really is black magic. That and this is why I wrote the article about the ancient gods and how they were believed to have 2 parents, like a parent of a god and a parent of a mortal, and that when they had the parent of a god, they would have these abilities, and that they would be the heroes. And so I think that they're trying to reproduce some of these ancient myths about heroes from God and human, unions.
Yeah, the unions.
And what we call moonchild kinds of things now in occult magic.
Interesting. And is this kind of similar to the, I don't know how to pronounce this, is it Chimeras or Chimeras, where you have...
Yes, Chimeras.
Yeah, so they're it's very similar, mostly, trying to create something, like two different, genes out of, and create one being out of that.
Yes. And in fact, the chimera is not a true clone or a true hybrid. It actually has qualities of two different genetic strains that could be combined in one individual chimera. I mean, you can have that with certain skin conditions, or where that could be actually what they're doing, because I think it's harder to splice the genetic material than we think. There's different ways to graft in different characteristics. So, and that gets complex. But the chimera would be exactly what they're probably doing.
Wow.
And then if they can get that characteristic of the god, then that's what they imbue in the super soldier. So a lot of them really do have these abilities, and they're pretty phenomenal, but they're very confused, and they're traumatized, and they're hurt. And, of course, the biggest question is, how can they get their abilities back under their own control and command, and not under the handlers and the programmers who use the different triggers and codes and technologies to make them do things that they don't want to do and they wouldn't want to do.
Exactly. Interesting.
And so, I mean, our protection and the survival of this, quote, war is to return to our own humanity and divine soul source and of the earth, And we need to reconnect with that to get back to our original, maybe genetic memory of what the original code was meant to be.
Yep.
And I think that we all can access that memory. I mean, there's shamans who can access that. So that's the key is like a reconnect with what is organic and what is natural.
Yeah, and when you speak of, we're talking about the spiritual war, we're talking about that war between darkness and the light, or...
Yes, because the darkness is accessing other dimensional entities from other universes, even maybe, like the dark universe, like the Horus Ra entity, and then parasitizing them in people to give them certain superior abilities, but it changes their humanity. It disconnects them from their soul, basically. So it takes their humanity away from them. So we want to maintain our humanity by not connecting with these beings. We don't need to connect with them.
Right.
Although there's a question that some people say that there are some who are human just like us and who are advanced. And I guess you just have to go back to what your perception of their energy is, and what their interaction is, and what the proof of the fruits of their, what do they call it, the fruit on the tree.
That's right.
And because I can't judge every single one,
right.
I can't say black and white. All I know is what I feel, and all I know is what the evidence is of someone who's parasitized by a dark energy entity who has a soul disconnect going on. They will vampirize your energy. And they do act as energy vampires in these weird-ass, like, love-bite relationships where they, throw you these emotional highs and lows and feed off of it, and then turn around and make it all your fault like a psychopath. And at the same time, they can have superior psychic abilities and be able to fool many people with true psychic abilities, because they're tapping into something, but it's not necessarily human and organic. It may be more demonic. It's just a very, very good deception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question: does history repeat itself? Do you feel that we're at pretty much similar to what Atlantis experienced?
I think so. Based on even what some people remember in some of their, what do you call it, past lives?
Right.
That they remember technology, they remember the cloning, they remember, half human, half lion, half human, half wolf people. They remember the wars with the crystal technology, and they have this in their memories, and similar things are happening where it's a war of the mind and the soul. So I think similar things, similar wars and karmas are being played out. But it seems to be, I hope it's over soon. I'm really tired of this. I would hate to think this just goes on and on and on. This is just part of what this planet about. But the whole thing with the Gaia mythos, which I find exciting, that if it's true that there's a quote, a correction in the prophecy and the whole divine Gaia mythos, which gives the life cycle basically of the Aeon Sophia, who originated from a higher cosmic galactic core, like a higher being, a god being that plunged and became the earth, and that's so that her history and then her dreaming is actually us, humanity and anthropos, and what she dreamed up for us and the divine experiment, and the knowledge that the divine experiment has gone bad several times, but there is a time in the history of the Gaia mythos where the correction will take place to correct that archontic mistake that's causing the problems. And so that correction phase is going on as we speak. It's apparently like now, the initial conditions of that correction are taking place now, because Sophia is becoming more, I guess, sentient and lucid in her dreaming of herself. So I guess the whole idea is that because she plunged into matter so deeply, it would be like plunging into a dream and being non-lucid in a dream. And so you don't have as much control over the dream when you're not lucid, right?
That's right.
So, but when you become completely lucid and more realized as to your true nature of control over the dream and that you're dreaming it, then you can control the dream and correct the nightmare. So that is her process, is that she's waking up and we're helping her, and she's helping us all wake up to change the dream and to create the correction for the big archontic parasite problem.
Yeah, hopefully this is it. I mean, how many times are we going to go through this, It's like...
Yeah, I suppose we may have a memory of that as well.
Yeah.
There's many of us who've been incarnated over and over and over, and we want to get out of this. We've been doing the same thing over and over. I mean, I think that we learn from our mistakes. It's just that you come into this world basically with no memory, and if you're lucky, you'll start remembering. And I think at this time, people are remembering more, because there's more energies being blasted in at this time where people are being forced to wake up.
Yep, absolutely.
Painful as it is.
It is painful. Yep, absolutely. So let me, what would you like? We've got about, 15 minutes left. Do you have anything that you would like to share during this last 15 minutes for the audience to know?
Well, just that this is an ongoing issue that is just becoming more and more apparent to me, that the necessity for personal growth and the deeper shadow work, deeper work with soul connection is a great necessity. I would say that is an importance, that people need to know their history.
Yep.
That not only their history of this life, but to go as deep as they can in terms of a true connection, so that they really understand their history. Because by understanding our history, we can understand how to get out of the problems we're in and to understand why these things are happening to us. Because a lot of people, they don't know. They get kind of caught up in this feeling special, entertainment, it's all about me kind of stuff, and then they forget that you can't get to the truth by staying in that place. And let me give you an example, because I've had many different, quote, clients who have come to me with different issues, and everybody's unique.
Sure.
It's like some people tend to be, let's say women, maybe more emotional. We may tap into the intuitive realm more easily. We may want to go into feeling states because that's part of our nature, whereas men may want to stay on the more intellectual, mental, left brain level. And so, in terms of becoming whole and aware and connected, we have to connect, the right brain with the left brain to have a holistic, integrated awareness of different aspects of our being and how to perceive reality. And so when someone stays on, let's say, the left side of the brain and looks at it as an intellectual puzzle to be solved with all these anomalies in their life, and they'll never get to the answer because they're staying in the part of themselves that will never yield them the wisdom that they need to get out of the problem. So the problem is, a lot of people, they stay in the left brain, and they cannot connect with the other parts of them, which gives them the answers and will give them the wisdom and the power to completely understand and solve the problem.
Correct.
But people are staying in either one side or the other, and they're not balancing out their own beingness because they're not wanting to look at their own pain and their own emotions, because that's what they run from.
Yeah.
So, and it's frustrating for me to see how this plays out, and then it's like, to me, it's like, quote, a no-brainer. It's like, duh, can't you see, this is the problem, but they really think it's some scientific puzzle to be solved, and it's not a scientific puzzle to be solved.
Exactly. Yeah. I totally agree.
So,
wow.
But
Wow.
yeah, I guess that's about it. And just to say that I would love to, my book should be coming out in Italian in the fall. I don't know exact date, and that I would like to get it out in Spanish, and we've kind of talked about that too.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what we can do with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. So anyway, Eve, thank you very much again for being with us. It's always such a pleasure, and it's so enlightening because you bring the stuff that's really hard to look at. It's real, but somehow it's more palatable. I think when I hear you talk about it, it's a little bit more. It's easier, to the ear, I guess, because I think you're coming from that. It's coming from a woman. It's a little bit more. It's easier. I think. Yeah. I don't know.
But we could have so much science before we really have to go to what I call the divine feminine wisdom that will really solve a lot of the issues that have not been addressed because we've been so corrupted and so dominated by perception of reality according to the male patriarchal model that we really don't even know and can't even perceive the solutions because the perception is off.
Absolutely.
So we need more people to be into the divine feminine power to appropriately ground and support for the growth of appropriate perception and the power to solve the problems. That's how I see it.
There you go.
And so
I agree.
That's where I'm at.
Us ladies need to stick together and start powwowing.
Yes,
absolutely. I think we have a lot of the solutions. It's just that we're not speaking up. We're not standing in our power.
We don't know how to speak up or get it out into the world, and that's what we want to do with this project with Rise Multiversity. So. I'll keep you updated on that.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. You had mentioned, and I wanted to get the correct spelling of, let's see here, it was Stephen...
Oh, Stephen Colburn.
Yeah, how do you spell his last name so people can look?
Colbern, and I can give you a link. I have a link I could throw in right now.
Okay.
Hold on. And it's on his website of photographs of alien implants, but he has also other things on there. I just need to...
and I just wanted, the audience to be able to get the spelling so that they can do their own research on him. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
And the fluorescence, I also have articles on that, and he's done a lot more photographs of the fluorescence since there's more that is emerging in the research, which is good. I'm glad there's research being done with alien implants and the scientific end of that. Although, my bottom line is that, technology and science is good, but ultimately our consciousness and our soul is the most powerful. We must never, never forget that.
Yep.
And don't ever fall into the trap of feeling powerless because alien technology is, too smart for us to ever get out of, and we're all hopeless. We're not hopeless.
We're not.
Never hopeless. We're never powerless, and never forget that.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. That was powerful right there.
That was something that my mom told me years ago, and I would never forget it. And I, give her my gratitude for, waking me up to say, you are not powerless. No matter how much you think you are not.
That's right. So, it's all the illusion or the deception that they're trying to impose on us.
Yes.
So, Eve, your website is Lorgen, evelorgen.com?
evelorgen.com, and I'll just make one little small comment in terms of, there is another project that I took part of actually years ago called the Universal Seduction Series. And that's also, I don't know if I have that on my website on my book page, but it's a compendium of like 40 different authors and 3 large volumes of a lot of the material that was going on in the alternative and conspiracy and alien research at the time. So I contributed to those 3 volumes with several interviews of super soldiers, for example, and the implant article and the fluorescent article. So I'm also in those books, and they could be purchased, I guess, online as well.
Fantastic. So that's Universal Seduction Series?
Universal Seduction.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so your website where everybody can get your articles is evelorgen.com. They can get a copy of your book, The Love Bite or The Dark Side of Cupid, on Amazon.com and also BarnesandNoble.com as well?
Yes, and it's ebook and hard copy, so we got both to choose from.
That is fantastic. Well, Eve, thank you very much for do you have any closing thoughts, or are we pretty much wrapping up?
Oh, let's just pray that this Syrian situation is solved.
Yeah.
And we will continue to have peace as much as we can, and that our consciousness will direct events through our desires and our dreams and our unwillingness to allow the perpetrators to continue what they're doing. We just have to stay strong in what we really want.
Exactly.
And not let them gain the upper hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Thanks
you've
for
been
having me.
listening to Shattering the Matrix. You've been, of course, listening to Eve Lorgen. You've been listening to Part 3 of Milabs and Super Soldiers. This is Ari Kopel, your show host today. And you can hear us every Saturday evening at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on blogtalkradio.com. Thank you very much for joining us. Eve, thank you very much again for being with us. We'll catch you next time.
Oh, thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
You've been listening to Shattering the Matrix with your host, Ari Kopel. Please visit our website, 2012emergence.com. That's 2012emergence.com. Find us on Twitter at Matrix Shattered and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Shattering the Matrix. Listen to archived shows at blogtalkradio.com/Shattering the Matrix. And join us next time for the birth of the new golden era on Shattering the Matrix.
For surgery, she was 60 years old.
Wow.
And she said, I also experienced extreme fatigue and could not concentrate. The illness lasted about a month, after which my energy and health returned with a renewed vigor. My creativity and mental clarity improved remarkably. I had a startling improvement in me 3 days. I'm reading this here. She said she had a startling improvement in her memory, where I was able to recall a previous alien abduction experience from 1991. In other words, it was the first time I was able to pierce through a screen memory from an abduction, although it took me 3 days to process the memory. It was difficult mentally and emotionally. But in hindsight, after the implant surgery and recovery from the illness, I felt detoxified. And so she did feel better afterwards. But one of the interesting things is that she and another woman, they both had something like shooting pains in their leg where the implant was removed, but not necessarily from the surgery itself. It was a different effect, like a month later, where the scar just turns bright red and then getting weird shooting pains down the leg.
Wow.
But it wasn't due to infection or anything like that. Strange reaction 6 months later. Yeah. So anyway,
that
a
is
couple of people felt like their psychic abilities improved, and then one person felt like their psychic abilities did not improve. So I really think that the implants definitely do something to, for the nervous system. They definitely affect with the nervous system. In fact, Dr. Lear found out that there was neural tissue surrounding the implant that connects with the nervous system. And you can get extreme pain, actually, after these things are removed because they're connected with the nervous system in a strange way.
Wow.
So, we know that they connect with the nervous system. We also know that they connect with the bioenergetic pathways. And I remember having spoken to a woman years ago who's also involved with reverse speech, by the way, and I could mention that a little bit. I guess she had an implant, or she knew someone who had an implant that was put in. And at first, she remembered her dreams pretty well. And then after the implant was put in, she stopped having dream recall. So you see things like, the lack of consciousness and the conscious awareness is dulled by some of these implants, I believe, depending on, what kind they are. And there's different kinds that are in different places of the body. And that's something also that Dr. Malanga has found. And also another researcher that I want to mention is Steve Colburn.
Oh, yeah, sure.
He works with Dr. Roger Lear, and he's also in Southern California. And he's got a website that has published a more recent implant analysis in terms of its material and some photographs. And he found that there was, I guess after the implant was removed, or during the implant removal, and it was in the foot of a person. It had broken up into 12 parts, and it was, I suppose it's difficult, when that happens, but they took all the parts of the implant out and then put it into a tube of serum and blood to keep it in there. And then what it did afterwards is those 12 pieces reassembled themselves as if by intelligent design back together again. And so that was kind of weird. And one of the things that he said, and I thought was interesting, is that he thinks that there was things inside those implants in that particular case that resembled carbon nanotubules, and that implants will emit a radio frequency, and that's one of the things that he does when he goes to some of these conferences, is that he'll use a device that could detect, I guess, RF radio wave frequencies, and that some implants actually can emit a frequency, and that's how he can tell that they're present in some of those kinds of implants. So we know that that does exist, and they are there.
Yeah.
And I think that people remember aliens putting them in or taking them out, and sometimes people think that.
Hi, this is Ari Kopel with Shattering the Matrix. We have our wonderful guest today, Eve Lorgen, who's back with us today for part 3 of Milabs and Super Soldiers. And for all of those that, of course, know Eve, there's no introduction, of course, but for those that are brand new to our show and have not heard of Eve Lorgen yet, you'll be in for a wonderful surprise. But Eve Lorgen is a dedicated counseling professional. She's also a UFO alien abduction researcher. She's a yogi and a writer. She began her pioneering work with alien abductees while earning her master's degree in counseling psychology in 1992. She also holds a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry and worked in the biotechnology industry for 7 years. Eve started a support group in 1994 in San Diego, California, or San Diego County, California, for experiencers of anomalous trauma, and continues to consult with anomalous trauma clients worldwide today. She was a close associate of the late Barbara Bartholic and is dedicated in continuing and expanding the work of the late Dr. Carla Turner. Eve also is the author of The Love Bite and The Dark Side of Cupid. So you can catch those 2 books, which are really wonderful books to have and to understand this phenomenon that she's going to be discussing today. But you can pick those up in Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Anyway, Eve, thank you very much for being with us today and for joining us today for part 3.
Thank you. Yes, we have a lot to share, and I thought I would talk not only about maybe some of the Milab things, but also alien abductions and a little bit about alien implants, the fluorescence markings, and some of the work of Dr. Corrado Malanga and how it correlates with what I've found in my own, practice. So I think we'll have a lot to talk about, and
that's fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to it. Yeah, absolutely. So where would you like to start? I mean, what would you like to,
Well, I'll just start with current events and the time that we're in right now. And I know that this show will be recorded after this pre-record a few days, but in September this month, it seems to be a very energetically powerful month.
Yeah.
I've been having actually a lot of challenges in my personal life with family member deaths and illnesses, and just I guess my sensitivity has been amplified by, I believe, I'm just trying to get more in tune with what I call the planetary animal mother, the Gaia Sophia, divine wisdom, and taking the planetary Tantra vow, understanding like the Dakini shifts, as we call it, when we have each new moon, or a day after that, you go into a new shift of energy, and I guess it would be like an aspect of Sophia, or the planetary animal and mother. So we'll have different Dakini intelligence aspects, which they give their instruction and have their essence of being overshadowing that period of time. So I've been tuning in with my sensitivity more amplified, so it makes life a little bit more, let's just say, there's been a lot of ups and downs, and the upping of sensitivity of energy. I think that's been happening with a lot of people in general that I've talked to, not just people who are involved in, let's say, the planetary Tantra.
Right.
So, but really, so I'm just going to say, have a little compassion for not only everybody around us, but me. And I usually don't ask for that, but it's been very challenging for me lately to even maintain my calm amidst all the things that are happening in the world, which, of course, the Syrian situation, and people not wondering from one day to the next whether or not we're going to have World War III, and it's the government. So it's both going on. In fact, one of the super soldiers that I had interviewed had an implant behind his ear, and one of the ones, I guess, behind his ear, he said that was the communication implant, that particular implant actually allowed telepathic communication between him and his handler.
Interesting. Now,
so, different kinds.
Quick question now, in reference to these implants, once they're removed, as far as you're aware, does that prevent the person to get abducted again? Does that reduce the abductions? Does it stop it altogether, or not?
I would say no. It does not, and they usually come back at some point. And one of the questions in my interview from 1998, it was did I think that the aliens were cognizant of the fact that the implants were removed? Was there anything unusual that happened before or after the surgery? And indeed there was. In some cases, it was as if they were trying to stop them from getting the surgery by disrupting them from getting into the meeting, or having an abduction like a week before the surgery to, check in on them, or a week after to do their medical checkup, so that they know. They have a way of knowing. They usually come back.
What's the purpose of the implants? Is it to track the person, or to mess with them, or?
Well, now I think after studying Dr. Malanga's work in conjunction with Dr. Roger Lear's and Steve Colburn's work, is that not only could they be used for tracking, and it could act also as a kind of what I call an object link in magic practices, where people who are magicians can use something as an object link, which would create a portal or a location. It's able to locate people from one dimension to the next.
Okay.
So that people, let's say if you have an object link put in by a magician in your home or on your body, then that allows that person to be accessed by a demon or by the magician, or even a telepathic object link kind of situation.
Wow.
So I think that kind of thing is happening on a more subtle interdimensional level, that there's technologies that do things on a more subtle level. It's not as simple as like radio waves or EM waves, So not only that, but one of the things that was reported by me privately to someone who was in the field, there's nasal implants, obviously. Those are very common, and sometimes people remember those things being inserted far up into their nasal cavity, up into the brain. And sometimes, these things will come out naturally, like if you sneeze them out. I even actually know somebody who recently had one taken out and a new one put in. And her abduction
new and improved.
Yeah, they were. It was a new improved model, and these were military, and they said, oh, well, we're removing the old one. There's a new one, and it's much smaller, and it's much more advanced. And basically, so they update their technology, and they'll take out the old one, put in a new one,
Oh, my goodness.
So, but anyway, with this other report where there was a nasal implant being sneezed out, they managed to capture it and then analyze it, look at it under a microscope, and maybe analyze it, because this particular person said it was something that had like a lot of tendrils on it, like let's say a main mass, but then with a lot of like tendrils on it, and that these tendrils were made of like a biopolymer kind of substance, and that this particular person believed that the biopolymers act as, I guess, almost like artificial dendrites, where it reaches into and connects with the neural system in your brain to connect with neurons, so that they can create these networks in the brain to enable alien hive mind telepathic connections and consciousness.
And was that one in particular from the military, or was that an alien thing?
That was alien. That was alien. That was believed to be alien. Let's put it that way, based on, or at least think there's a bunch of positive ones out there that you're in contact with, and that makes you special. And really, that makes me puke, to be honest with you. I get so upset sometimes that I don't even want to talk about alien abductions sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So because of some of the things that I see, and it just makes me sick inside when I see how some people are being, I believe that they're being manipulated and deceived and seduced into thinking that the aliens are something that they're not. And I guess it's because I see so much of the pain and suffering of what people report to me that I just can no longer take that stance that I see a lot of the popular new agey kind of ways of viewing it. So,
well, there's a lot of people with that alien worship that you're talking about, and many websites out there that are pretty much shunning anybody from coming across as being negative towards aliens. In other words, you cannot even talk about this alien abduction thing because they'll just basically kick you out of a website. So
yes, or a forum. I mean, that happened years ago when I actually had one of my own forums, and where they actually kicked me off my own list because I was really just letting loose on some of the reports that I had from super soldiers who were having actually conflicts with aliens and actually killed a few aliens in those experiences. And I made a joke out of it, and they got pissed at me, and we're like all feeling sorry for the aliens. I said, "Are you kidding?" But anyway, so
wow.
Yeah, that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But the implants, even years ago, what I thought was interesting is there's some that can show up as metallic or what they thought was meteoric in origin in terms of its content or its physical components that show up on an X-ray. And most of the ones that they did remove were either in the feet or the lower legs, and one of them was in the jaw of an individual. But there were some that were considered non-metallic, which I thought were interesting because in those two cases, it was two females who had implants in the lower leg or the lower calf area. And after it was removed, about a month after the implant was removed, they had dramatic effects such as the reddening of the implant scar and burning, and then shooting pains down the leg. And then one of the women had almost like a diuretic type of effect after the surgery, and like a whole month period of time had felt ill, like she was kind of going through a detoxification process.
Wow.
But then what happened in that one woman's case is that she actually had memories come back that were previously screen memories, and she was able to get through like a screen memory to the real memory after the implant was removed. And of course, it suggested to me that the implant acts in ways to block certain pathways, certain energetic pathways of consciousness, as well as other things.
Amazing.
But and then after she went through this kind of like a detoxification process, I could even read a few quotes from
if you could,
the article if I can find it. And this was from, let's say, 1997, I believe, and it was in a magazine called Alien Encounters, which was actually a British magazine that published this. And I also have this probably on my website, but you'd have to go through a search and
dig in there, huh?
yeah, and it's so hard because I have a blog, so you can only see the recent ones.
Right.
So I'm just going to quote the lady. I'm going to call her Dorothy O'Hara.
Okay.
She felt a sense of relief, definitely a sense of relief after her alien implant surgery. It was one in the leg. And she said, the most striking changes, she said, I had a severe diuretic effect and lost much water weight during the week following the surgery. Then I developed angina and edema as my health problems worsened. This heart problem was actually a recurring complication from a previous illness that she had when she was in her 20s. And at the time, and how this even connects with what we call the third force, I've heard someone talk about recently in an article, where the third force is really an aspect of what they call the satanic, demonic / archontic, or the dark, malevolent alien agenda, and how that has infiltrated our world and is playing itself out in a really big way right now.
Yep.
So, and not only understanding how that's working, but what we can do about that, and understanding, the alien presence with respect to the malevolent parasitic ones. And so those are the kinds of things that I deal with, is a lot of the dark side, and then learning how to balance the light side with that within myself, and also maintaining my own sensitivity, which is a real balancing act. I mean, in order to maintain one's sensitivity, you feel not only the good, but you also feel the bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it's very challenging to do this. So
I agree.
I just wanted to point that out, and I'm sure that you've had reports of your own.
Oh yeah, I was just going to tell you that don't think you're alone out there, because you're not, and not only from my own personal experience, experiencing very a lot of challenges right now, feeling a lot of these energies happening as well. But I speak with a lot of people who are also experiencing the same thing, and everybody's going through their own challenges. So so I just wanted to maybe we'll just start a Glee club or something.
I think think so. The Glee Club that's aware that there's an unusual war going on,
Exactly.
and we are the pawns. And when we have our awareness amplified, and a lot of people are waking up right now. I mean, how can we not wake up with all these things happening?
Yep.
And even the events that are happening worldwide, it's as if it's forcing many people to wake up, whether or not they want to or not.
Exactly.
And that can be a painful process.
Yep.
So
Totally agree with you. Totally agree.
yeah.
Wow.
So I guess I could start off with saying a little bit about alien implants.
Yeah, that's
and
a good one.
some of the more scientific things that have been reported within the alien abduction research community, and things actually have been going on since the mid to late 1990s, when I got involved with collaborating with Dr. Roger Lear and Daryl Sims, and I had attended one of their alien implant surgeries, actually a couple of them, where there was at least 5 individuals who were going to have surgery to have different alien implants surgically removed in different parts of their bodies. Mm-hmm. And so this happened in Ventura County, Southern California. I think it was in 1996. And I actually wrote an article about it, because what I decided to do way back then was interview the people who had those implants removed, and to ask them questions about, before and after their implant surgeries, and when they might have remembered those implants being put in them, if they remembered the experiences, and different levels of awareness about, the before and after of when their implants were taken out.
Okay.
So I felt that was very important at the time, although I think at the time it wasn't considered scientific enough for me to even do this. So actually I did that without the permission of both individuals who were involved. They got mad at me for jumping the gun on it, but I thought, no, this is too important, because there's so much just what I call the disruption and distraction and the warfare element to prevent people from coming to an awareness of what's happening, how it's happening, and what it's really doing to them. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And of course, I still believe that's true today in terms of the larger popular opinion, or what I call the popular flavor of the week in the UFO circus community, is really to idolatrize the aliens as being some advanced intelligence who are so much better and smarter than we are, and and kind of ogling over them. And it's like this popularity thing where, in order to be accepted, you have to kind of look at it from a neutral perspective.